We have a quorum, so let's get this bird off the ground. The first order of business, as we do with every city virtual meeting, is Janine will give us some brief instructions on how to conduct ourselves.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Committee members and staff, you have the ability to mute and unmute yourself. You can also rename yourself if you wish and add pronouns after your name. Please do not alter the naming convention otherwise. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name that you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the committee, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First order of business is approval of last meeting's minutes. Do I have a motion and a second? Okay, moved by Craig, seconded by Tom. All right, we've got approval of the minutes. Fantastic. Okay, next order of business is, I believe, find my agenda here, public comment. I did not see any registrants for general public comment. All registrants are registered to speak on items that are further down our agenda. Next order of business is disclosures and recusals. Any disclosures or recusals? I have a recusal on agenda item number 3. So at that time, I will ask Craig to please fill in for me. Okay. Let's see. Janine, could you give us a brief agenda overview, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Okay, this evening's agenda for Wednesday, June 9th. We wanted to make a note to the public. Written comments for agenda items you can send to Urban Design Comments at City of Madison. Please note that comments received after 3 p.m. may not be added to the public Legistar file until after the meeting. Fast forwarding to the next page, the chair noted that we didn't have public comment under item number 1. So under special item of business, we have a report of the facade grant team for 517 through 521 Cottage Grove Road. Final approval is requested for this item. You'll notice that there's a UDC staff and facade grant team report in your packet. And kind of outlining the recommendations, staff is recommending this item for consent. Item number 3 under unfinished business is 6145 through 6301 Mineral Point Road and 502 Genomic Drive. This is an amended plan development requesting initial final approval. The UDC saw this item back on January 13th of this year for an informational review. If this item receives at least initial approval, it will go on to the Plan Commission on June 21st. There's a staff report in your packet outlining some of the PD conditions, as well as some of the notes from that informational presentation. Under new business, item number 4 is 4000 International Lane. This is a public building for an addition at the Dane County Regional Airport. Well, this is one of those items. It is a public building, and typically staff might be able to review this at administrative level, but those powers are not outlined in the ordinances at this point in time. Therefore, it has to go before the commission. They're requesting final approval, and staff is recommending a possible consent item. That's this evening's long agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, as you heard, staff suggested that items 2 and 4 could be potential consent agenda items. Is there a motion for either one of those or both for the consent agenda? Lois?
Yeah, I would recommend that items 2 and 4 are consent.
Okay, is there a second? Craig? Okay, I'm gonna just lower hands, and if anybody wants to discuss that, Tom, I'll unmute you. No? Okay. So no further discussion on those motions. If I don't see any other hands, by unanimous consent, then items number 2 and 4 are approved on our consent agenda. That then brings us to agenda item number 3, which I will be recusing myself on. Janine, or I don't know if there is a staff person who can unmute Craig kind of permanently for this agenda item. I will do it now, and then I will mute myself. Thank you.
Okay, I have unmuted Craig for this particular item, and I'd like to note the design development team that has registered to speak. If I miss anyone, please let me know. Jeff Bogart, Christopher Sina, Reginald Hillsop, although that is Oakwood Village University Woods. I'm not sure if that is part of the team, so forgive me. Ann Anderson is part of Mead and Hunt. And at that point in time, let's unmute the team members, and I will pull up the video screen shortly.
All right, design team members, are you guys unmuted? Go ahead and make your presentation if you're ready.
Jeff, are you?
I think I got everybody. Okay.
There we go. Can everybody hear me okay?
You bet.
Yes. Okay, excellent. My name is Reg Hislop. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Oakwood Village, and I'm here tonight with the design team to address the project in front of you. The project is a replacement project of an existing building on the University Woods, Mineral Point. Some folks refer to it as Oakwood Village West Campus. We are looking to replace the existing facility known as Hebron, which is a skilled nursing facility, with a new facility. This facility is smaller in scale than the original facility. It is going to be comprised of 5 patient wings, 4 of which will be specifically relegated to a skilled nursing facility clientele. So primarily a post-acute, recovery-oriented rehabilitation clientele. And 1 unit will be relegated for a hospice palliative care clientele or patient type, which are folks that are in the end stages of life. Can you advance the slide 1 for me, please? So by reference, you can see the site. The first to your left visual is Madison. The green dot down below is the Oakwood Village campus that we are referencing. As we zero in, you can see the red dot, which is the exact location on Mineral Point. So the facility that we are looking to locate, or that replacement building, would be towards the southeast corner, southeast access points of the existing University Wood campus. That area today is partially parking lot, as well as some undeveloped green space. Can you advance 1 more slide for me, please? So this is the site itself, and you can see the identified corner there that we're referencing, where that parking lot is, and then the highlighted square is the development site. The site was chosen for a number of different reasons, but most important, the site was chosen for access or connectivity to the existing University Woods campus. On this campus, The specific location was desirable given that we could connect to existing infrastructure, support existing infrastructure as we continue to work through the need to demolish certain portions of the site and redevelop certain portions of the site. So this is phase one. It is, as I mentioned, the skilled nursing facility site. The Hebron building will come down. It will be replaced by green space. The site of the existing building is too tight for any other form of development. We also lack a certain amount of exterior space and for green space. The building time cycle is approximately 14 months from start to finish. And there aren't really any changes in terms of employee load, additional parking requirements. As I mentioned, the actual number of residents in terms of this site will be somewhat less than the current site by about 20 different units. So with that, I will turn it over to the next speaker on our team.
Hello, this is Ann Anderson from Mead and Hunt, and I just want to talk about, so I'm the civil engineer and the site components and what has changed since you saw this informational submittal. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So the site, can you advance the slide?
There is a slight delay, so.
Yep. Okay, there we go. So the previous layout is on the left and the current layout is on the right. And since the informational submittal, we kind of reconfigured the site so that we are saving a lot more trees. You'll see that the bioretention pond that was once kind of in a wooded area where we were taking down trees at that kind of oblong drop-off area is now included in the center of the drop-off to save on tree removal. There was a pond in the back of the building. That pond is no longer needed. We've removed the connection road that was going through the woods completely and rather change that connection to go between the new building and existing Covenant Oaks building. And the kind of the parking area was sort of tightened up more just so that we have better connectivity throughout the site while maximizing kind of the green space. And most importantly, the building was moved and kind of realigned into more of a 90-degree orientation. And with that connector road between the new building and Covenant, the tunnel that connects it, we're basically just driving over that tunnel. So there's that building connection that Reg mentioned, but it's all underground. It was some more visible than previous submittal. So those are the major changes. We're still in a good place for stormwater management. We still have green roof, which you'll see a little bit later in the presentation. We're in the Rock River TMDL, so we're still aiming for greater pollutant removal, the 80% threshold. We've got infiltration of the 10-year storm and infiltration of the 1-year storm based on if it's new development or redevelopment. And as Reg mentioned, parking spaces, we're actually losing a few parking spaces from existing to proposed. The existing site has about 309 surface stalls, and we're going down to around 304. So bicycle stalls were increasing. We were at, in the GDP submittal, we showed 140 bicycle stalls, and now we're at around 164 to kind of bring it up to compliance. And let's see, stormwater. And our final kind of change is just kind of this project area is just very steep, and we're sensitive to that and want to prevent erosion in the woods. So we've got some other kind of plunge pools at stormwater pond. Anywhere we've channelized flows, we're incorporating features, these plunge pools, to help mitigate for that. You'll see at kind of the top part of the screen, which is the west side of the site, northwest side of the site, there's an existing pond that's part of the conservancy area of Oakwood that Oakwood owns and maintains, and that's all going to remain same as before. And what we're trying, all the stormwater goes to that. We call it the vernal pond. So we're trying to protect it and keep it natural. It was naturally occurring. It was not a man-made feature. So that sums it up for the site. And I think next up is Bruce Allison to talk about the tree analysis that was done.
Bruce, you should have a prompt to unmute.
Good. Can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Oh, good. So I'm Richard Bruce Allison of Allison Tree LLC, and could you show my slides now?
I can fast forward through the set and let me know when I get to the one you want.
Okay, thanks, Janine. You'll see a lot of trees. Maybe keep on going. There you are. So go back one if you would be kind enough to do so. So what I did was to go onto the site several times, and once the plan had changed, which saved quite a few of the forested area, I tried to identify more carefully, what the nature of that particular group of trees that would be in the construction area. And I did that by trying to take the basic canopy and identify just those trees that were over 24 inches, because what I was looking for were particularly remarkable bicentennial trees that had great historical significance, to see if any of those were in there. And I was able to discover that using a technique that was developed back in 1976 by one of my mentors, Walter Scott, in identifying the age of a tree relative to its trunk diameter, and then followed up by a study that I did in 2001 rather, using the standard of a 10-foot circumference for a wider burr being a bicentennial and a 14 to 15 for a red oak, and discovered that there were no bicentennial oaks in there, but there were 2 red oak sesquicentennial trees and 6 white oaks. I then went a little bit further to identify the nature of those larger trees, and I used a technique. And the next slide, please, Janine, will show that the graph of that. Take a look in the upper right-hand corner from the viewer's standpoint. This is a tool that is very effective in looking inside trees to determine if there's decay on the inside. It's called a micro drill, developed in Germany some time ago. And it sends in a 1.5 millimeter drill bit into the tree. And the higher amplitude on the graph, which would be to the right as you're entering, shows that you have dense wood. And then if you go into a cavity, as we did in this particular red oak, it's very hollow on the inside. And that allows me to see, and it's very common on the older red oaks to have that heartwood decay. So their longevity is less and more subject to other problems. So I took a look at the recycling part of, harvesting those trees that had larger bole. I'm very focused on not losing the value of a tree if it has to come down, but rather to find a way to recycle it. Obviously, for carbon preservation purposes, that is very important, but also it enhances the construction that's going on, or there might be other uses for that wood. And so I've recommended a couple different spots that the wood could go to be harvested. I feel very strongly that they should not just be cut up into firewood, but rather the wood preserved on those larger trees, especially the sesquicentennials. It is very important during the construction phase to be right on top of the big equipment, the planning process. We've already done that and trying to preserve as many trees as we possibly can. I would be on site. And in the 2 other projects that I've been involved in or 3 other projects at Oakwood, we've had great success, both at the Heritage Oaks and the Oaks. These pictures reflect the large trees that we've been able to protect, and including in the nature preserve when we put a path in there. I think it was Findorf did that project years ago. So it's sort of proof in the pudding. It can be done if it's done right. And I've been told by Oakwood, as they have in the past, that I would be allowed to be the tree protector during the construction process. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Anybody else from the design team that would like to present?
If you would flip to the landscape slides, I can give an overview of the landscape plan. It should be not far after this.
Sheet L100, is that good?
Yes, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this is a fairly zoomed out view. I should introduce myself. My name is Chris Sine. I'm a landscape architect with Psyche Design, and this is the full site landscape plan that you can see here. And obviously, we wanted to do our best at replacing the number of trees that would be affected by this project. So between the building and what would remain of the woods, we would propose, several large shade trees, as well as a mix of understory trees and some evergreens, to sort of reforest that area, using native species and some non-native species as well. But really our focus was creating a diverse mix of trees to go in there that would have ecological and ornamental value. So a fair amount of trees in that hillside that would be disturbed by construction. And then, of course, foundation plantings and fairly substantial parking lot plantings throughout the rest of the site as well. And if you'd flip one more forward for me, please. And then here you'll see a more conceptual, but still fairly accurate rendition of what we would propose for the Hebron Oak site as it was after it was demolished. The chapel, which is the structure you see sort of in the upper left hand, that would remain, and then the area where Hebron now sits would be converted into open green space. It gently slopes from the lower left hand corner up to the upper right, sloping down in that direction. So we would have we would propose long meandering sidewalks that would traverse up that slope and just add to the existing fairly impressive connectivity that's on the Oakwood campus as far as walkways throughout. And so we would maintain those connections and create an open park-like green space in this area. Thank you.
Next up is myself, Jeff Bogart with EUA. Janine, if you could advance the slide to the one before the lower level floor plan.
Okay, I'll keep going, noting that there's a bit of a delay.
Right.
Apologies, it's taking so long.
Okay, this slide is fine to start. So as has been mentioned in the previous conversation, the chief design changes from the original review submittal are relative to the building location and geometry. We have relocated the building as far north as possible to pull it out of the wooded area. And we have also altered the geometry of the building to make it a 90-degree L shape to further retreat the building from the slope and the natural wooded area. In addition, we have also reduced the overall building footprint from the original submission. In the previous iteration, there was an ambulance bay, which was a lower projection, a one-story projection. We also had a one-story mechanical space that also kind of intruded into the hillside. And we also had a more elaborate connector element between the new building and the existing Covenant Oaks, which was at the lower level. So we've actually reduced the building footprint, and by means of the tunnel connection, have been able to kind of minimize and reduce the overall footprint. Next slide, please. Keep going. All right, just to briefly then go through the building programmatic areas. This is the lower level. It is basically into the slope of the hillside, but it is exposed at grade on the north side, which is to the right of the page. The lower level consists of mainly back of house areas. We have a central receiving and loading dock and a main campus production kitchen, as well as staff support areas and administrative offices. You also see the tunnel connection that connects to the existing lower level of Covenant Oaks, which is being renovated as the campus pharmacy. We have also located the ambulance bay on this level to kind of keep everything at a service level and a service drive and separated from the upper floor and the main level. Next slide, please. The first floor consists of a central hub, which is the main reception area, the central reception area for the building. It includes a small bistro and community room with a covered terrace that overlooks the wooded area to the south. The central service core is a hidden service model which incorporates the food service circulation, laundry, refuse, and medical support functions. The two wings on the first floor are comprised of a hospice dedicated wing. This is composed of 12 private bedroom sitting rooms with private baths. There is a small den, and it also has a family-scaled living, kitchen, dining area so that families can gather. Proximate to this wing is also a small meditation reflection chapel. The hospice wing is distinguished from the other typical wings in that since it is located on the first floor, the lower level provides the opportunity to create some direct outdoor access to paved roof areas so that families can provide a little bit of respite from the hospice experience. There are some seating areas and green roofs that are developed, and that's kind of unique to this household wing. The other wing is comprised of a spa and salon, as well as the physical therapy or wellness wing, which includes PT, OT, and speech therapy. Next slide, please. This is the more typical floor where you see the central hub service core. The two wings radiate off from it. Again, it's comprised of 12 resident bedrooms, sitting rooms, private baths, and a household that shares a living dining area. So it's a very intimate family scale experience. They share the service core. The service core provides a support pantry to the residential scale kitchens. There's med rooms, IT support, trash collection, linen rooms, as well as a spa bather, which provides a different experience than a resident would have within their private room. And the third floor, next slide, is essentially identical. Next slide. So the building geometry has been changed from the original, the curving glass and the multi-tiered hub area in the center core has been greatly simplified. The palette of the building is also quite straightforward and simple. It consists of two scales of masonry units, vertical fiber cement type siding. So the palette is quite simple. The roof screening elements would be a metal panel. As you can see, the geometry of the building is reflective of the geometry of the resident rooms with their projecting bays to allow the residents to have a better outdoor connection with larger windows. The central hub area also has some expansive window areas which look out onto the wooded areas and the ponds and the views beyond. The lower level that you see at the bottom elevation, we've kept it very utilitarian. It's basically blank walls. Those are all back of house areas. So we're basically being stewards of our resources and putting window area where natural light and views benefits the residents versus back of house type areas. Next slide. This just shows basic, the basic elevations all the way around the building. Next slide. So to discuss the materials in greater detail, again, the palette is quite simple. We've chosen 2 scales of brick, modular, and a larger 4x16 format size in kind of a light buff color. The larger scale brick being at the base of the building and the modular brick being at the upper levels. The siding elements are a Nichiha panel vertical expression, and we've deliberately chosen a coloration and a grain and a pattern that mimics the bark of the trees. So we want the building to kind of blend in and complement the forested areas and the tree trunks beyond. There are some precast band elements to separate the base of the building from the upper floors. The metal roof basically screens the elevator overruns and the mechanical units on the rooftop of the building. 2 window systems. There is a more of a residential type Marvin type window in the resident rooms, and some of the central hub core areas employ a storefront window system. Next slide. So these are the rendered views. This is the main entry as you're approaching the building. To your right would be Covenant Oaks, and you see the main entry canopy beyond the hub of the building is expressed in that darker vertical paneling. You see the articulation of the facade with the projecting bays. You'll also see the water feature, which is designed to kind of mitigate the appearance of the surface parking. The road then does continue between those 2 buildings, and we have made an effort to create an enhanced landscaping so that the building kind of settles in to the landscape. Next slide, please. This is just a closer up view. Again, there's a covered entry drive to the main vestibule, the main lounge. You see the road sloping down to the lower level to the right. The building forms are just quite simple and quite straightforward, but there is, some interest in articulation, shade and shadow that's developed by the building geometry and footprint. Next slide, please. This is the view from the lower level. There would be an entry at this level, and as we mentioned earlier, there would be an ambulance bay entry at this lower level as well. To the left of the page, you see the existing Covenant Oaks building, which it has an entry canopy which would lead you directly into the what will be the new main campus pharmacy. So there you see how the road kind of slopes down gently between the buildings and creates a sense of openness there. Formerly, there was a physical building connection that connected at the lower level, but this has allowed us to create a more naturalized landscape with a tunnel that's completely underground between the 2 buildings. Next slide, please. This is a view from the first floor, directly outside of the community room. is a covered terrace, and it would look out upon the slope of the existing site. The landscape plan is to create a transition from the building hardscaped areas gradually upward and outward into the naturally occurring wooded area. So it becomes kind of a transitional zone or a transitional element. The lower level, or this level at the PT department, would hopefully someday also include a therapeutic terrain garden, which would aid in the therapy program. Next slide, please. And then this is just some of the existing context on the campus. Some of these buildings will remain, obviously, and over time, some of them will disappear. Our building is designed to complement, but be distinctive, and really respond more to the concern and the effort to kind of preserve as much of the natural woodland and be gentle with the site. It's part of a, kind of creating a new brand for the campus as they move into the future. And I think that is all we have.
That was the last slide.
Okay. And I believe we are available to answer any specific questions that could be directed to any member of the design team.
All right, thank you very much, Jeff, and the rest of the team for presenting. So it's just a reminder, this is the second time we've seen this. They provided informational back in January. Had a lot of good comments and discussion at that time. And by the presentation, they've done quite a bit of work since then. And it looks like they've addressed lots of items that we brought up before. So,
Chair, this is staff. May I jump in real quick?
You bet.
I wanted to ask ask Julie to please double check to see if there are any people that had registered to speak. Is the member of the public?
You read my mind. You read my mind, Janine. I just double checked it, and there are none.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Janine and Julie, for that. All right. Any comments from commissioners? Shane, let me try to unmute you here.
Oop, I think I did it. You can hear me?
Perfect. You bet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll kick us off. I think, first of all, big kudos and big thanks for some of the major changes you made in response to the tree protection and reconfiguring the site. I think it's a great improvement, and very happy that you considered some of our comments. I think one pretty minor comment I had on the landscape plan was just looking purely at the species list in the planting palette first. I was at first thinking that proportionally there were too few oaks relative to some of the other ornamental trees that you had. But I see kind of the intent and how you are placing them in the planting plan and using them primarily in that back hillside area. And I think there's strong logic there in what you've done. I do think that maybe proportionally the number of non-native evergreens compared to your native oaks could sway more in the favor of additional white oak species or bur oak species. But I think that's a fairly minor comment overall. I think the trade-off with some of the big changes that you've made is that there is a little bit of funkiness in that driveway that slopes down between the two buildings. It looked like it was maybe 10% slope, if I remember right. And so not a gentle slope necessarily. And I think maybe there's a little bit of fine tuning that could still happen in that space so that the the pedestrian crossings that happen right at the top, all kind of jammed right in there with the drop-off area, that all maybe works a little bit better. But I acknowledge that was a trade-off of some of the things you did by eliminating the back service road and all of that site work. A couple comments that include questions here for the site layout. It appears that down at the bottom or on the top of the screen that we're looking at, there's that large swell area in the paving roundabout, let's call it, which appears to be probably related to the truck turning movements of some of the service areas in those bays. I'm wondering if you could just confirm that, and that's why that is, and that's why the site disturbance kind of swells into that north natural area as much as it does. And then the second question is that, well, I guess first a comment, it seems just to the right of that in the northeast corner of that roundabout, there's a lot of pavement there. It's like 75 feet wide. And I'm wondering, again, is that part of a truck turning movement, or is there any way of tightening that up so there's not so much asphalt paving down in that loop? So yeah, I think that's it for my comments. Just those two questions. If the design development team could answer, that would be great.
Janine, if you could unmute Ann, oh, it looks like you are. Perfect.
Yeah, I think I am. I can answer those questions specifically. So the site layout, if you want to go back to the sheet that you were on when Shane was speaking, you're absolutely correct. The kind of large swell area, if you want to go to sheet C, if I can find the number here, it would have C101 possibly, C141 would be the one that he was looking at. Or that one works too.
Right there.
That works. So the large kind of swell area on the north side of that, what Shane was calling kind of the roundabout around that pond, is absolutely for truck turning. One thing that the truck dock area was is at an angle with the yep, right there, yep. And in order for the truck to, so the trucks come down that connector road, and then they turn right. And then they have to come down and then back into there and be able to get out. So that's all for truck maneuverability, and they do have some large trucks that are delivering. So that's how we got there. We wouldn't have added all that extra pavement if it wasn't necessary. And then that other area where it's roughly 75 feet wide, that's a tricky area for a couple of reasons. One is this area is currently a drop off for Covenant Oaks and for Tabor. So Tabor is the one directly north of the pond, and then Covenant Oaks has those two enclosed courtyards in it. And those drop-offs are going to be maintained. And so in order to get truck turning movement and maintain those drop-offs, that's why we have so much pavement. And the one drop-off for Covenant, that one has an overhang, and there's foundations there for the overhang that's also going to remain. So the trucks can't go underneath there. They wouldn't be able to turn and get out. So in order to maintain that access and still have the truck turning movement, that's why that got so large, unfortunately. Yeah.
So could the trucks not kind of come down and then stay left and then basically pull into that swell that we were first talking about and then back into the service?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that is what they do. The normal traffic goes counterclockwise, so cars that are dropping off, but the trucks will come down and turn left. You're correct. I misspoke. They go left and then they pull forward into that swell area and then they back up into the truck dock.
Okay.
Yeah, and then when they leave, then they go clockwise and go back through on that connector road. So yeah, that was kind of the trade-off of losing that other connector road was now we had to add a little bit more pavement down at that lower level where those other two drop-offs are for Tabor Oaks and Covenant Oaks.
Okay. Thank you. And thanks again for the diligence in evaluating the trees.
Absolutely. The team effort.
All right, thank you, Shane. Janine, could you please unmute Tom? I don't have that ability. Thank you very much. All right, go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. I guess I would second Shane's endorsement of the care taken to change the configuration of the building and take into account to the protection of more trees. That's responsive to what we said last time. A question I have might actually be for Janine. Do we have the perspective of the last version, the original, the version we saw several weeks or months ago? But specifically, I'm trying to recollect the architecture of what I call the knuckle, where the two wings meet at the central service core. It seems like that part of the building, design-wise, has changed fairly dramatically. There were things we liked about the previous design, and I would just like to see visually again the before and after, if that's available to you, Janine. I don't know.
It can be, if you don't mind giving me one.
If you want
to correct it, it has changed quite a bit.
Okay.
2 minutes.
Yeah, if somebody else wants to ask a question while you search that out.
Chair, you should be able to mute and unmute panelists now.
I can. Thank you very much. More buttons appeared all of a sudden. All right. While Janine's pulling that up, anybody else want to comment? Russell. Go ahead.
Thank you, Craig. One item that I remember we talked about last time, and it's in the staff report this time, is about the PD discussion. The plan development having goals about density. And do we know? I've got maybe one question for staff and one question for the design team. Do we know that the density here in terms of residents is comparable to those goals? And then the second question is to the design team, whether there's any plan for vertical expansion of this building. I assume not, because we haven't heard about it, but that's just to try to align with the PD goals.
So Janine, I know you're busy hunting. There you go. You found that. So if you could address either Russell's comment or Kevin, either one of you, as far as the PD density.
Defer to Kevin if he's able to jump in.
Sure. And as far as the density, I would start by advising the commission of the comprehensive plans recommendation. That's the city's overall recommendation in terms of site density and intensity. And in this case, it's recommended for high residential or high density residential. And the parameters of that are discussed or summarized in Janine's staff report. But I believe that the development as proposed could be considered consistent with that underlying land use recommendation for density.
Thank you, Kevin. Russ, did that answer your question? Perfect. Any other comments, Russell? Okay, you're good. All right. And Tom, I know Janine just put back up that picture a second ago, so you're unmuted again if you wanted to execute more.
It is as dramatic a change as I was thinking it was in my head, but I just couldn't recall the previous edition. So I guess I would just ask, I mean, this is obviously both more dramatic. I realize the current knuckle is not curved, but more right angle. But there are aspects to this more dramatic original proposal that I like, and just architecturally in terms of design and impact and statement. And I'm wondering if there isn't some compromise, some middle road that would bring some of that element, and particularly the all glass element to the central core there, back to the proposed design, if that isn't a possibility, or why this initial was completely scrapped.
I think I could address that. I think as we were considering being good stewards of the site, stewards of the natural resources, we're also thinking about stewardship of the design relative to constructability and the budget. We also had a concern that we were getting too much glass area and investing too much in areas that were actually not directly related to resident care. And it was really, maybe a little bit grandiose. We're also cognizant of the greater glass areas kind of getting us into the issue of dealing with bird safety glass and so forth. So we thought that as an overall effort in simplifying the configuration, the location, the geometry of the building, the constructability, reconciling budget concerns, that we sought to simplify the building. Retaining, the basic massing of the wings. It's really just a change in that expression of that hub, which had been kind of a highly expensive, multi-tiered solution, which was also designed to relate more closely to the expression of the lower level connector, which has now been really replaced by an underground tunnel. So the rationale for that is kind of eroded with that study. And we felt that the faceted angles kind of suggested some of the orientation and the relationship to some of the other buildings and the geometry on the campus that's created by the other buildings. So it was an effort in simplicity. It was an effort in reconciling all of those resources. I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to respond to that on the design team.
I guess I would just ask the designers on our commission whether it feels like the corner, the prominent corner, we often look at corners of buildings. Granted, this is not on a street, it's within a campus, but it has diminished to the point where it almost doesn't speak to the point that it is the nexus of the building. It is the entranceway. It's lost all its prominence. And I just wonder if there isn't maybe a middle ground that respects budget, but they could give that corner, that juncture, just a little more statement. That's my response.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Any other comments from commissioners? Russell, let me get you here. Here you go, sir.
So thanks. I'll just start by completely agreeing with the earlier comments about, I think, the bigger picture questions on the site, the asset of all the beautiful oak, natural landscape there. And so I think all really great changes, positive changes there. It's the gift and the curse of an informational maybe, but I do remember that facade from the informational, and I really liked it as well. I agreed with Tom's comments there. A couple of questions maybe to the design team to try to help us understand this current presentation a little bit better is I saw in the informational design that there was a heavy kind of honoring of the existing campus, and I believe there was even discussion about a nod to an older building that I believe is or the Hebron building, I believe that's going to be raised. And so I would just ask, what about this current design? Does the design team feel is still, aligned with those design goals? And then a second question, actually it's more of a comment. I mean, this building reads to me much like a lot of the multifamily residential buildings that we see. And what I thought of that the initial design really had that set it apart was to really express those central functions in the hub, as you call it. And I agree with Tom. I don't believe we're seeing that expression any longer. So I guess a comment there at the end, but if the design team would like to speak to the topic of, honoring the context with the rest of the campus and how this design maybe is improved in that way.
maybe it would be helpful to kind of scroll through all of the images. I think it's also not just about certain views of the building, but maybe the building in the context or the relation of the other buildings and how it kind of, it settles into the site and, creates spaces in between buildings. And it's really more about, I think one of the things Oakwood is known for is you're not seeing it in these images because of the time of year these photographs were taken, but the sense is that you've got lots of buildings kind of within a very natural and wooded setting. And each building doesn't necessarily have to shout or be the star. Some of them can be maybe the quieter background. I think it's more about the idea that the form, the geometry, references some of the angles of some of the other buildings on the campus that will remain. There'll be a lot of subtractive happenings or reductions over the course of time as some of the more antiquated or problematic buildings are taken down. So the character of this as a village collection of buildings will start to change over time. So I guess this building isn't meant to be a design star, but it serves a purpose in a very handsome way. And it's a more of a simplistic, understated statement, perhaps, and not trying to be, too showy or too glamorous. And again, focusing the resources on the quality of the resident experiences, the private rooms, the social spaces, and so forth, as well as the development of some of the community spaces within the center of the building. So it's not designed to be an architectural statement as much as it is to be just a handsome building for its purpose.
All right, thank you very much. I did not see who raised their hand first, so I'm going to call on Rafiq.
No, you can let Lois go first because I think we're going to say the same thing.
All right, fair enough. There you go, Lois.
Or you're just afraid I'll contradict you. I'll let you contradict me. So there, every project, there are push and pulls with, what you want to stand out, budgets, everything, the properties of, or the results of having a lot of glass. Then you have to go to the bird glass. And so I can see where, as all of those components are being discussed, I appreciate that the natural setting of this was the priority. And I actually liked the more reserved detailing of the building. I think the other one with all the facets was getting a little busy for me. So I actually appreciate the restraint, or the more restraint in the design elements of this building. I think it's a handsome building, and I do appreciate that the landscape was pushed forward and maybe prioritized more. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Lois. And Rafiq.
That's what I was going to say, word for word, literally. I like this design a lot better. I think that it's obvious that they went in a different direction for obvious reasons, and this is what we have.
Thank you very much. I would say the same thing. This both been said. Of all the push and pulls on project, especially one like this, where you're trying to struggle with your resources and where you put features, and there is a balance. And I think you as design progresses, as Tom said, you see certain things and then they go away and change. But as the overall of what you guys have done here, and kind of tying back to what Shane said originally, there is a lot of comments, and as far as collaboration, with the UDC. I think it's very appreciated of where this came from originally, and some of the pushes and pulls that you guys did as a design team to get us here. So Russell, I think you just put your hand up again. I'll call on you.
Well, thanks. I was going to make an attempt at a motion here. I'd like to move that for approval with some of the comments that Shane had mentioned to just try to increase the balance a little more toward the native oaks with some of the new plantings.
And was that an initial or a final approval, Russell? Because they're asking for a combination.
My motion is for final approval.
Final approval. Okay. And then Lois, is that a second on final approval? Okay. Thank you very much. So if nobody raises their hand, I will have this be a vote of unanimous on consent. And it is. So final approval with the one note from Shane for more oaks in lieu of the evergreens. Thank you very much. Cliff, I will now hand it back over to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to the design team.
Thanks, Craig. I was meditating. So that is the end of our published agenda. We do have the secretary's report, and I think it would be appropriate for us to reflect on Janine's service and contributions. But before we as a commission do that, I'm wondering if Kevin might like to lead off from the staff perspective.
Thanks, Cliff. And I do. I'll just keep it brief, but I wanted to say a few words. And it's hard to believe it's been nearly 4 years since Janine joined our staff and has been staffing this commission. And she's just been an incredibly valuable colleague from planning. And just wanted to thank her for her leadership, her initiative, her design sensibilities. She's just made countless contributions, not just to this commission, but to the rest of the staff. There's a lot of things that she does behind the scenes and just on other projects. And she's just been an incredible colleague. She's going to be missed quite a bit, and want to wish her the best in her new endeavor. So thank you very much, Janine.
Thanks, Kevin. Do I get to respond to that, Chair?
You can second it.
Second it. And say that, we all know that, Julie and Kevin both do a lot behind the scenes too, to make all of this magic happen. So I definitely want to say that it was a team effort, all of this. That's all. Thanks,
Janine. For those of us who served on the commission under Al Martin's leadership, there was some big shoes to fill there. And, you stepped in and, lent experience and leadership and real objectivity for us. And it didn't take you that long to really get the feel for the job. I know we're going to miss that and the energy and the obvious care that you brought to the job and, to the built environment in the city. I know that you bring the same kind of energy to things like the AIA. So we at least can be consoled knowing that you'll still be part of our community.
You'll see me again, but I'll be on the other side.
Well, but you're going to have you'll have to keep it to 3 minutes. All right. Anyone else? Any parting shots?
Yeah, I think that Kevin and Julie, you're going to have to send me backup emails now every week to make sure that I get the stuff that goes out. Janine was good for making sure that I got the information that I needed ahead of the meeting. I definitely appreciate that. I wish you waited till my project went through before you left, but now I got to depend on the rest of the crew, but you're definitely going to be missed. So
You're in good hands.
Well, then good luck to you, Janine. And we hope to hear about your successes. Certainly, where you're going is a big developer in this sort of way.
Thank you, Cliff. I mean, this is such an incredibly talented and diverse group of folks. You bring so many different skills and knowledge and experience, and I'm just so grateful to have been able to work with all of you.
Thank you.
Honor as well, Janine. Thank you.
And as you know, or I should remind everyone, we've got 3-week interval until our next meeting. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone there. Is there any other business by members before we adjourn? Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you, Janine and Julie and Kevin. We'll be seeing you next time.
Thank you to our IT staff.